March 12, 1967. I was a company commander with the 1st Infantry Division during Operation Junction City when we moved into the Iron Triangle, the stretch of land north of Saigon, bounded by the Saigon River and Highway 13. Intelligence briefings described it as a long-established enemy stronghold, a place that had resisted both French forces and repeated ARVN sweeps. On maps, it was marked in heavy ink as if the ground itself were hostile. What we found when we entered was not resistance, but absence. No civilians, no visible supply trails, no signs of panic or hurried withdrawal. Just tree lines, compacted soil, and the uncomfortable feeling that the area had been emptied with intention. That kind of silence is never accidental. It meant the enemy had decided when and how contact would occur, not us. My company consisted of roughly 112 riflemen supported by 2 M60 machine guns. A battalion had attached a 60mm mortar section, and artillery from nearby fire support bases, 105mm and 155mm, was available on short notice. On paper, we had overwhelming firepower. The mission was straightforward: clear the area, destroy enemy infrastructure, deny its future use. Within hours, it became clear that the Iron Triangle was not built on the surface. We began finding tunnel entrances hidden under cooking pits, beneath collapsed huts, even inside areas we had already secured. What looked like random terrain features turned out to be access points to a network that extended far deeper than we had anticipated. Some tunnels connected fighting positions, others led to storage chambers, medical areas, or escape routes that surfaced hundreds of meters away. This forced us into a kind of warfare that no amount of conventional superiority made comfortable. You cannot dominate underground terrain with artillery. You cannot secure it by massing troops. Every tunnel demanded men to guard it, investigate it, or destroy it. Every platoon was stretched thinner than doctrine preferred. Tunnel duty became the most dreaded assignment in the company. The first time a man went down, he usually came back changed. The second time, he tried not to go at all. We escalated our response. Engineers were brought in, dogs were deployed. Airstrikes and artillery flattened grid squares suspected of containing major tunnel complexes. Entire sections of jungle were defoliated. Villages were evacuated and razed to deny cover. From a reporting standpoint, progress looked impressive. Tunnels destroyed, bunkers collapsed, enemy contact disrupted. But from the ground, the pattern was clear. The enemy did not defend positions. They avoided decisive engagement. They absorbed punishment, disappeared, and returned elsewhere. Sniper fire, mines on trails we had cleared days earlier, short, violent contact followed by total silence. We could win every measurable engagement and still feel like we were losing control. By April, clearing operations gave way to occupation. We established semi-permanent positions, rotated patrols, and continued tunnel destruction. Bulldozers reshaped terrain that had resisted previous efforts, and yet activity never truly stopped. It simply became harder to locate. At night, movement was reported where none should have been possible. During the day, booby traps appeared in zones marked secure. Intelligence placed enemy units in areas we had physically occupied the week before. The Iron Triangle wasn't pushing back. It was waiting us out. By late summer, strategic priorities shifted. Higher command assessed the region as sufficiently neutralized. Resources were needed elsewhere. Orders came down to reduce presence and redeploy. We dismantled positions methodically, collapsed what tunnels we could find, packed equipment, and pulled back in stages. On official reports, the Iron Triangle ceased to exist as a functional enemy base. As we left, the land returned to its original appearance. Quiet, undisturbed, almost untouched. That should have been the most troubling sign of all. We learned what that silence meant only after we were gone. Within weeks of our withdrawal, reports filtered back through intelligence channels. Supply caches reappeared along the same routes we had cut. Tunnel entrances that engineers had collapsed were reopened or bypassed. New firing points appeared near roads we had once controlled. Areas marked cleared began showing enemy movement again, almost as if our presence had never mattered. From a command perspective, it was unsettling. We hadn't been driven out. We hadn't lost a major engagement. And yet the Iron Triangle had reconstituted itself faster than expected, faster than logic suggested it should have been able to. Looking back, the mistake was assuming the Iron Triangle was a place. It wasn't. It was a process. While we measured success by terrain held and structures destroyed, the enemy measured success by continuity. As long as their networks remained intact underground, surface losses were acceptable. When pressure increased, they withdrew. When pressure lifted, they returned. Our occupation was temporary by design. Theirs was permanent by intent. I later reviewed after action reports from units that followed us into the area months later. They described many of the same conditions we had encountered: hidden access points, booby traps, fleeting contact, and an enemy that refused to be fixed in place. Different company names, same terrain, same problems. The Iron Triangle didn't need defending in the traditional sense, it only needed time. From a tactical standpoint, our firepower was overwhelming. From an operational standpoint, it was blunt. Every large-scale sweep announced itself days in advance. Every airstrike confirmed that we were focused on the surface. The enemy adapted accordingly. As a commander, that realization was difficult to accept. We trained to seize ground, to hold it, to deny it. In the Iron Triangle, ground was something you passed through, not something you owned. The war there did not reward aggression. It rewarded patience. Years later, historians would argue about whether the Iron Triangle was ever truly neutralized. Maps would change, control lines would shift, but the pattern remained consistent. Whenever American units left, the area reverted, not because of defeat, but because of design. We had treated the Iron Triangle like a fortress to be reduced. In reality, it was an ecosystem. Destroying parts of it only forced it to adapt. That lesson followed me long after I left Vietnam. Not every battlefield is meant to be conquered. Some are meant to be endured. That understanding didn't come all at once. It settled in slowly, long after the maps were folded away and the operation names blurred together. At the time, our doctrine didn't leave much room for a place like the Iron Triangle. We were trained to identify centers of gravity, to apply force until resistance collapsed. But there was no single point there to break. No headquarters to overrun that stayed destroyed. No line that, once crossed, changed the situation permanently. Every time we thought we had reached that point, the enemy simply shifted deeper, geographically, psychologically, temporally. They accepted losses in exchange for persistence. We measured time in deployments, and rotations. They measured it in seasons. I remember sitting in a briefing months later, listening to another unit describe renewed operations in the same area. Different officers, different call signs, same terrain overlays. When they spoke about tunnel complexes and elusive contact, it felt like hearing an echo of our own reports. Nothing had changed. That was when it became clear that our withdrawal hadn't created a vacuum. It had merely removed an obstacle. From the enemy's perspective, our presence had been an interruption, not a threat to their existence. They had planned for it, absorbed it, and waited for it to pass. When it did, they resumed operations as if following a schedule we never saw. In hindsight, the Iron Triangle taught a lesson that didn't fit neatly into after-action summaries. Control based solely on force is temporary. Control based on integration, with terrain, population, and time, is durable. We had firepower. They had permanence. When people later asked whether the Iron Triangle was won or lost, I never had a clean answer. The truth was more uncomfortable than either option. We fought hard, destroyed much, and left believing we had changed the equation. But the equation had been written long before we arrived. And when we left, it simply continued, unchanged, unhurried, and waiting for the next unit to come and learn the same lesson all over again. What stayed with me most was not a single firefighter casualty report, but the pattern itself. The Iron Triangle exposed a gap between how we understood warfare and how it was actually being fought. Our operations assumed that pressure produced results, that if you applied enough force, the enemy would either break or flee permanently. In that area, pressure only produced absence, and absence was misleading. When we weren't there, the enemy wasn't gone. They were simply unobservable. That distinction mattered more than we realized at the time. Every metric we used favored us: body counts, tunnels destroyed, sorties flown, rounds fired, territory swept. On charts and briefings, the Iron Triangle looked like progress. On the ground, it felt like repetition. You could clear the same area 3 times and still feel like it was the first. I think that's why the Iron Triangle never became famous in the way other battles did. There was no single moment of collapse or triumph, just a long, grinding realization that control did not equal dominance and destruction did not equal denial. The enemy never needed to defeat us outright, they only needed to outlast us. By the time American involvement in the war began to draw down, the Iron Triangle was still there, altered, scarred, but functional. The networks remained, the logic remained, the land still favored those who understood it better. Looking back now, I don't describe the Iron Triangle as a defeat. That word implies a decisive moment, and there was none. Nor was it a victory. It was something quieter and more unsettling. It was a lesson in limits. We entered believing that superior force could reshape any battlefield. We left understanding that some battlefields are not meant to be reshaped at all. They absorb force, endure it, and wait. The Iron Triangle didn't disappear after we withdrew. It returned to what it had always been, a place where presence was temporary, where patience was decisive, and where the war continued long after we convinced ourselves we had moved on. Years later, when I thought about Vietnam, it wasn't the big operations that came back first. It was places like the Iron Triangle, areas that resisted definition, refused to behave the way our planning models said they should. In training, we were taught that once an enemy base was destroyed, it ceased to exist. In reality, the Iron Triangle showed that a base was not always a location. Sometimes it was a relationship between people, terrain, and time. As long as that relationship survived, the base could disappear and reappear at will. We had measured success by what we could see. They had built their strategy around what we could not. When American units pulled out, the Iron Triangle didn't need to be rebuilt. It simply resurfaced. Paths reopened, supply routes reconnected. Command structures resumed operations beneath a landscape that looked, to an outsider, unchanged. The jungle closed over our scars faster than we expected. That was the most sobering realization. The land did not remember us. All the firepower, all the engineering effort, all the months of pressure, none of it left a permanent imprint. We left behind craters and broken trees, but not control, not influence, not resolution. If there was a single mistake we made, it was believing that withdrawal marked an ending. For us, it did. For the Iron Triangle, it was just a pause between cycles. I don't tell this story to suggest that the men who fought there failed. They didn't. They did exactly what they were trained to do, with discipline and courage, under conditions that defied simple solutions. The failure, if there was one, belonged to assumptions larger than any company or battalion. We assumed that war could always be forced into a decisive shape. The Iron Triangle proved that some wars resist that entirely. Even now, when I see maps of that region, I don't think of boundaries or grid coordinates. I think of patience, of endurance, of a battlefield that didn't need to win, only to remain, because in the Iron Triangle, the enemy never had to defeat us. They only had to wait for us to leave.